Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is schedule management process. We will be talking about the exactly the process that needs to be carried on to complete a schedule or a project altogether. So agenda for the day, there are basically we'll understand the definition first and foremost. We definitely would love to break down the process into various steps that can be available out here. We'll talk about a small and a large scale example. I have definitely included the small scale case study, a large scale case study altogether, but have abstained from a dashboard so as not to confuse you, since I believe that all of you are into schedule management as a student and fresh. Let us have the concepts very clear before we enter into the bigger things altogether. And definitely, how can you apply it in your own personal life in terms of your professional and your personal endeavors that is there. So definition, as per the project management association, if it call around it, schedule management is application of processes. It is into plural things. Please remember that it's methods, knowledge, skills and experience to arrive at a scheduled objective. So first and foremost thing, you have your objectives which is clear, and then the various steps, that milestone that a person entangles from here itself, uh, that is what the schedule management would be all about it. So we have this person who goes into to these objectives with various steps, so methods, the knowledge, the skills, experience which needs to be taken care of. So schedule management typically involves a short-term schedule, a specific outcome, and the utilization of resources, both in terms of manpower and also in terms of capital. So we have a short-term schedule, which is a small milestone that comes around it, a specific outcomes, the objectives, the goals that we are endeavoring it to achieve as such. And in the process, remember the process will actually consume a lot of human work, human effort, a lot of capital, a lot of other resources per se. So the process we need to understand, we need to have the objectives in place. Look at it, everything is a disarray at this particular picture. We are not very clear as to what is going to happen. We have to keep coming to a shape and give a shape to this particular slides or whatever it comes around it. So we need to have the goal around, we have to go talk about the time, we talk about the cost, and we have to talk about the scope. So it's a plan process in which the scope has to be built in, absolutely the scope has to be built in, the cost has to be built in, and the time factor has to be greatly known as. So we have the definite outcomes, the time, the cost, and the scope needs to be planned around, and then comes the execution, probably the part of it to achieve the objectives, the pinnacle that we are looking at it. Once we have achieved that objectives, now you can have to get and evaluate what exactly is to be done. Have you done it in a very cost effective method? Did it consume a lot of time, or was there a barter between a cost and a time, or what way we can improvise it, improve it so as to achieve similar projects at a much faster rate and a much feasible fashion. So define, we'll have to define the outcomes. Typically, it is predetermined. Typically, it has been given by the client altogether, initiates and drives the schedules. The client will also actually insist upon delivery to be as fast as possible, because money and time is always involved into it. So the typical outcomes is ideally defined at the very onset. Talking about the scopes, remember the graph that I made around with you. If you look into it, this is where it all takes around it. We have the time factor, the cost factor, and the scope factor, and all these things will impact the quality. If you compromise on the time or on the cost, or if you compromise on the scope, the quality will be of inferior thing. So you need to understand, you need to have a plan for everything for these three things in primarily, that is of scope, that is of time, that is of the cost. We are talking about the cost and scope, we are talking about implementation, and the last part of the project is evaluation, because hence we will go for the case studies on the small scale factor and the large scale basis. So evaluation, if we look at it, the maze that's been shown in this picture, we have to come up with it and come up with an outlet around here. This is the outlet comes in. So we have the inlet and we have to go which path we need to finish it off. We need to figure it out. We don't have a ladder at the sense of it. But once we have arrived, probably you can have a scheme of a thing. So what is the result that we're looking at? What are the processes that we endeavor? What are the utilization of the budget, the lessons learned? If see, for every experiences that we might incur, even if it is a successful project or an unsuccessful one, there are certain lessons that to be learned altogether. Why a project might be completed but still unsuccessful? Because it was not profitable. The cost escalated beyond the planned thing. So that means you need to learn the lessons around it. You need to go for the proper documentation of everything that has happened in the project, and this will enable you a better project manager in future. Of course, definitely yes. So schedule management is a best practice method of planning and is guiding the schedule from start to finish. Remember, at the same time, always have patience. It is your patience that will count. Patience will pay you eventually. Keep your head cool. Understand all perspective. At the end of the day, you are the project manager. So it's all about method of planning, guiding a schedule from start to finish. So let us give the promise of two case study that I've already said it to you. Next four slides will be a small scale study, and then we'll have a large case study going around it. So approximately a new president and an interim wine president for a advancement that goes around it. So request for an executive dashboard. What is it? It should be educational. It should give me all features, all data and one factor. It should be having a comparative historical data of previous quarters or previous years and that of current year, and data visualization. Now this can be in the form of various charts that goes around it. It is a graphic user interface which can goes around. So various charts would be the best method of data visualization and representative of a broad goals as to how we are faring vis-a-vis the actual and the standard of prescribed goal that we have gone around it. So it's just a small, very small case study of having a dashboard which is educational, which is actionable, which gives a right picture, which has a visualizations of the data rather than the data itself, and giving a representative of the division goal. So what the executive dashboard will all have? It will give me a clear defined outcome. So how do we plan it? Let's say the time factor will be would be of 8 weeks. Cost would be what are the money involved in collaborative opportunities, for example, past data from which all department we have to collate it, and so on and so forth. The scope of the superior executive style as to how well they are versed with any software facilities, what are the platform that is going to work around it, the roles of the schedule managers, developers, programmers, stakeholders, both internal and externals are the roles that goes around it. So we have simply brought down into a time factor, cost factor, scope factor, and thereby we have incorporated the team members in terms of schedule managers, in terms of programmers, in terms of software developers, in terms of software coders, stakeholders, and so on. Then comes the implementation, and the next slide would definitely be of the feedback or evaluation that we go around it. So implementation is reviewing the sample dashboard from other competitors, simple and straight. Other competitors, what kind of dashboard they will follow. Now similarly, have clear-cut objectives and get approval from your management as to what would be the sample dashboard for yourself. What are the key features or key characteristics that will be taken care of. Assess data in a new data warehouse, wherein basically you collect the data and most precisely collate it. Assess visualizations tool in terms of reporting tool. Then there are many things. It can be MS Access or MS Excel. If you want to go around those things, we can have Python. We can have n numbers of visualizations that goes around it. So we can have Visual Basic also. So what are your software that you want to embed it with your data as such? Evaluate the ability to publish online, schedule the delivery, thereby. So as on when on basis. Now this can be done on a replicated basis altogether. We will talk you automatically give you back the information. Then comes the evaluation process. Outcome was met on the budget, on the time. What is the outcome which been done? Remember, we are talking about have we achieved that dashboard? Stakeholders' feedback, was it positive? You have to come up to the conclusion. Option to schedule delivery and publish online. Can it be there on the servers? Do you want it to be kept it on a local server or a cloud server that you go around it? Reporting tool was flexible to accommodate the reporting changes and enhancement over a period of time. So probably the management might say, we want to have a different kind of visualization. So that is what needs to be incorporated. It should be flexible enough. So remember, what are the pieces of your puzzle? This is very important. The process must fit the problem, or you will never find enough pieces to solve the problem in the other places. Let us come to the scale case study. Now, this is disastrous database conversion. This is big data. Remember, this is big data. Most application ties to old database, which is in shambles. Now, we are similarly going from a smaller case to a large scale basis altogether. So, we need to have, what do we need? We need to have a re-engineering backend data with a new database. Evaluate volunteers and login structures and enhance front-end user interface. Remember the previous data, it was just a dashboard which has the comparative data of the old quarters or old years and the current years and picturizations about it. But in this case, there would be individual logins that can be taken care of, and this needs to be taken, has to be understood every now and then. So therein we will come across with schedule management process would be what we are talking about. Clearly defined role. The time bound is again, we have improved from 8 weeks to approximately 6 months, 5 to 6 months. Scope is to have a time for a voluminous training. Now this is which we call it big data. This is all about big data that we talk about here. So cost, time, labor, it is intensive, definitely. Now, what are the various team member role that goes around it? Definitely as per the prior thing, but only the number of members will improve. The schedule managers, multiple staff members, did I say multiple times the staff team members will improve or increase. Stakeholders, annual giving staff, volunteers and partners from the different vendors that goes around it. So we have clearly defined thing. The scope has to be understood. It is all about big data that we go around here. The big data that I said it to you. Then the time frame is around 5 to 6 months. The cost is exclusively time and labor intensive. So it is going to be very, very intensive and excruciating to implement this large scale study. So process steps is something which we got to go around it. We will review the previous data, former class agent, evaluate all tables, rules, logic, and definitely what happens in this particular case is every quarter the data was representative and reported in a different fashion. No data, no reporting was univocal. There was no uniformity in the recording of the data. That needs to be reassigned. So every big data, this is a whole set of our data that needs to be reassigned, re-ironed, and properly data mining of data should be done. So we have to assess the best way to rebuild the tables, add enhancement, add different filters. I want to say carefully stage the task and timetable. Then comes the assigned schedule milestone for regular communication. Definitely, yes, this is of very important thing. Remember, the last step is always about the evaluation process. Schedule completed on time. You need to understand where you were able to be time bound, where you were able to be cost sufficient, cost basis. Stakeholder feedback, was it good, bad, ugly, or was it neutral? Better approach or better coordination among the team, increased usage in per year, and flexibility. Can we again be flexible in incorporating changes or altogether in terms of design, in terms of data entry, in terms of login? Remember, this particular thing was a large scale case study wherein people would just log in their data and it get accumulated at the back end of the software and get projected on the dashboard altogether. It is similar. Remember, both this case study are on a similar framework, but on the scale, on the scope, it is been manicured to be a small case study or a large scale case. So what are we looking at it? The crux of the thing is time plus cost should be equal to or more than, should never be more than or equal to scope. Scope has to be there. There has to be tended around it. The scope should be bigger and time and cost should be almost equal to or probably less than the scope that goes around it. So there we go. Time and cost, please have a focus around it. Remember about the production or project schedule that we go around it. Remember about the milestone that we don't talk about it. Remember about the dates that we need to deliver and the time of the project. So that is what the managing the project schedule is all about it. Time, the time in terms of milestone, times in terms of delivery date, time in terms of culmination of the project all together. This is end of it. We come to the last but one particular slide, which is in your daily life, how will you introduce it? So schedule management, which we have to go around here, is all about PDCA or plan, define, implement and evaluate. So schedule management is an application of process, method, knowledge, skills of achieve the scheduled objective. That is what the definition is all about it. So in your cases, both in terms of your personal attributes, both in terms of your professional acumen, you need to define what you want to go around it. Then start with, first is define it. Then start with planning of how you are going to achieve those objectives. Then start implementing it. And once you have implemented, did you achieve the desired objective or not? Answer it to yourself. You will see that you would have come to the culmination of what exactly would be the schedule management process is all about it. With this, I come to an end of this particular presentation. Thank you for watching this video.